ever find yourself wondering if something feels off, but then dismiss it as you just being too sensitive? Maybe it's the way he talks to you. Maybe it's how you feel after the phone call. Not uplifted, not calm, just smaller somehow. It's strange, isn't it? How even after 60, after all we've lived through, we still question our own boundaries before we ever question someone else's behavior. But here's what no one tells you. Love after 60 isn't about finding someone. It's about finally refusing to lose yourself. We've made peace. We've raised families. We've buried heartbreaks. We've earned our calm. And we are no longer in the season of sacrificing our spirit just to keep someone else comfortable. So today, I want to talk, woman to woman, about 5 quiet behaviors no man should ever bring into your life. They're subtle, but if ignored, they steal your softness, one silence at a time. If this message finds you somewhere between reflection and readiness, stay right here with me. Tap that like button, subscribe, and let's begin with the softest weapon of all, guilt, dressed up as love. 1. Never accept guilt as proof of love. The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. Marcus Aurelius. But when guilt walks into a relationship, it doesn't come with a raised voice. It doesn't throw things or slam doors. It just unsettles you. Quietly, like a fog. You can still breathe in it. You can still laugh, go to dinner, hold hands at church. But little by little, you stop seeing clearly. And more dangerously, you stop trusting yourself. Linda was 64 when she met him, a retired nurse with silver hair she let grow out after her divorce. She wasn't looking for love, exactly, just companionship. A warm voice on Sunday mornings, someone to ask if she got home safely, someone to remember her coffee order. She met Greg through her church community group. He was polite, charming, the kind who held the door a second longer than necessary. They started slow. Bookstore visits, potlucks, a movie here and there. He listened. He laughed at her stories about the ICU. He told her, "You make me feel peaceful." And Linda, after years of feeling invisible, felt seen again. But over time, something shifted. It was subtle at first. He'd say things like, "I just miss you so much when you're not here," or "It hurts when you put other people first." At first, it felt sweet, touching even, like he really valued her. But one day, she told him she couldn't talk on the phone that night. Her daughter had just arrived in town unexpectedly, and his voice changed. "I guess I'm just not a priority," he said. And then silence. Not anger, not accusation, just that deep, deliberate silence that said, "You hurt me. Now fix it." Linda found herself texting back longer apologies than explanations, canceling brunches with friends, rushing through grocery trips so she'd be home in time to call, not because she was told to, but because guilt had crept in. And it sounded an awful lot like love. That's the thing about emotional manipulation. It doesn't always shout. It sighs. It whispers. It wraps itself in affection and waits for you to trade in your voice for peace. And if you've spent years being the caregiver, like Linda did, you're more likely to mistake guilt for connection. Not because you're weak, but because you're generous. You've taught yourself that love is sacrifice, that being good means being available, that your own needs come second, or third, or not at all. But guilt is not a form of love. It's a tool, a lever used by someone who doesn't want to control you. They want you to control yourself for them, and it always starts the same way. You begin apologizing for having needs. You feel anxious asking for time to yourself. You start shrinking your joy because it might make someone else uncomfortable. Linda told me one afternoon, tears tucked behind her smile, "I didn't even realize I was disappearing until I couldn't recognize my own decisions." That's how it works, not with force, but with erosion. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." But how can you be master of yourself if someone is quietly convincing you that your joy is selfish, your space is rejection, and your boundaries are betrayal? Here's what Linda learned. Real love may be tender, but it is never fragile. It doesn't need you to dim in order to stay. It doesn't hold you hostage in the name of affection. You can love someone and still say no. You can be compassionate and still have walls. You can care and still walk away. So if you've ever stayed in something because you didn't want to hurt him, because you didn't want to abandon him, because you were told you were all he had, please hear this. You are not responsible for anyone else's emotional weather. Your love should not feel like a performance, and your peace should never feel like betrayal. Guilt may hold your hand, but it will never hold your wholeness. And now, as we move forward, let's talk about the next line that slowly disappears when love becomes a disguise for control. Isolation. But not the kind that's obvious. The kind that sounds like care, but cuts you off, one friend at a time. 2. Never accept isolation disguised as love. The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best. Epictetus. But what happens when love asks you to stop showing up for yourself? It doesn't begin with rules. It begins with whispers, a gentle suggestion, a tilted smile when you mention brunch with your friends, a quiet sigh when you say you're driving over to see your daughter, and slowly, without warning or confrontation, your calendar starts to empty. Not all at once. Just enough that you stop noticing, until you do. Claire was 67 when she met Robert, a recently retired school teacher. She lived with her adult daughter in a cozy 2-bedroom home lined with books and houseplants. She spent her mornings walking the neighborhood trails and her Saturdays at a community dance class, not because she was good, but because it made her feel alive. That's where she met him, Robert. He wore polished shoes and carried himself with the kind of confidence that suggested he'd been charming women his whole life. He asked her to dance, then asked her to dinner, then asked her to just spend more time together. At first, it felt lovely. He'd pick her up with flowers. He'd say things like, "I haven't felt this connection in years." Claire, after years of putting her family first, finally felt chosen, until one evening she mentioned her daughter was making soup and asked if he wanted to join them. He smiled, but something shifted in his eyes. "Why do you need anyone else when you have me?" It seemed like a joke, but later that week, when she planned to meet her book club, he told her he'd been really hoping for a quiet night in, just the two of them. And the week after that, when her sister invited her to a weekend retreat, he frowned. "Don't you think it's a little much? We barely get time together as it is." It was never direct, never forceful, just disappointing enough that she felt guilty when she left, and increasingly hesitant to say yes to anything but him. Within months, she had stopped going to her dance class. She hadn't called her sister in weeks, and her daughter, her closest person, started asking gently, "Is everything okay, Mom? You don't seem like yourself lately." And that's the thing about isolation. It doesn't always lock the door. Sometimes it just asks you to close it. One person at a time. Real love doesn't do that. It doesn't make you choose between affection and belonging. It doesn't shrink your world to fit one person's comfort. It doesn't guilt you for having a life outside its frame. Claire said the moment she knew something was wrong was when she missed her best friend's birthday brunch and didn't even tell her why. She just stayed quiet, because explaining would have meant confronting a truth she wasn't ready to name, that she had let herself become someone else's entire orbit and lost gravity with her own life. Maya Angelou once wrote, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." But what if the story inside you is slowly being muted by the voice of someone who claims they love you? Love isn't meant to eclipse your light. It's meant to illuminate more of it, to widen your view, to hold space for the people, the passions, and the history that shaped you. When someone discourages your friendships, your routines, your connections, They're not protecting your time. They're pulling the roots out from under your life, so the only thing left to lean on is them. Claire eventually found her way back. It took time, but she returned to her dance class. She rejoined the book club. She started Sunday dinners with her daughter again, and she said something I'll never forget. "He didn't make me lonely. I did that, trying to prove I was enough for one man, when I'd already been enough for a whole village." Let me say this plainly. Love that shrinks your world isn't love. It's a cage with velvet lining. And now, as we continue, let's talk about the next behavior that pretends to be helpful, but slowly chips away at your freedom. Financial control, dressed up as care. Stay with me. 3. Never accept financial control, even when it looks like help. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Epictetus. But there's another kind of wealth no one talks about, the kind that doesn't sit in a bank account, but in your ability to choose, to know what's yours, to decide freely how you live. And when that freedom begins to blur, when someone else holds the map to your money, your future, your life, even if they're smiling while they do it, you're not being helped. You're being handled. Evelyn was 70 when she met Carl. She had run a small bakery for over 30 years, the kind of place where people came for cinnamon rolls and stayed for her stories. After her retirement, she lived comfortably, not extravagantly, but independently. She liked knowing where every dollar went. She liked the feeling of writing her own checks, of saving up for a trip to the coast, of buying a new pair of walking shoes without asking permission. When Carl came into her life, it was through mutual friends. He was polished, successful, the kind of man who knew the ins and outs of mutual funds, tax law, and when to refinance your mortgage. At first, it felt like relief. He offered to help her organize her accounts, review her insurance plans, even take over paying a few bills so she could relax and enjoy retirement. "You've done enough," he said one evening, gently pushing her checkbook aside. "Let me take it from here. You shouldn't have to stress about any of this." And Evelyn, who had carried so much for so long, felt the pull of ease. She let go, just a little. At first, it was harmless. He automated her utilities, suggested she cancel a few subscriptions, moved her accounts into one place for simplicity. But months passed, and Evelyn realized she hadn't logged into her bank account in weeks, then months. She forgot the passwords. He handled everything now. She wanted to book a solo weekend getaway to visit an old friend. He frowned. "Maybe not the best idea, Ev. Let's wait a few months. Things are a little tight right now." She blinked. Tight? Wasn't her savings healthy? "I've been moving things around, optimizing," he said quickly. "It's better if I handle it. I'm protecting you from stress." She smiled, thanked him. But later that night, she sat on her bed holding her wallet and realized she didn't know exactly what was hers anymore. Not her money, not her decisions, not even her comfort. And that's what financial control looks like. Not always theft, not always deception, just a slow erosion of your independence disguised as protection. Maya Angelou once said, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." And love that reduces your voice, that makes you feel unsure, dependent, hesitant to ask questions about your own life, that is not care, that is control. Evelyn shared with me later, "It wasn't that I didn't trust him, I just stopped trusting myself. That's the cost. When someone handles your finances like they're doing you a favor, you start to feel like you owe them something, like you should be grateful, like asking where your money went makes you ungrateful, difficult, selfish. But love doesn't make you beg for access to your own life. Love hands you the login information and says, "Here, you deserve to know everything." Real partnership is transparency, respect, shared clarity. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to stay informed. You don't have to do it all yourself. But you should always feel like you could. Because if love makes you feel powerless in your own life, it's not love. It's a transaction. And now, let's talk about a different kind of transaction. Not of money, but of presence. The kind where you start to disappear from your life for the sake of being enough for someone else. Let's talk about what happens when love isolates you in silence. 4. Never accept disrespect hidden behind honesty. Before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Rumi. There's a kind of hurt that doesn't shout. It doesn't raise a hand. It doesn't curse or blame. It simply dresses up as honesty and chips away at you with a smile. Margaret was 66, newly widowed, still learning how to take up space in the world without the man she shared 40 years of her life with. Grief is quiet sometimes, and after a year of silence, her daughter convinced her to join a weekly book club at the local library. Something gentle, something just for her. That's where she met Daniel. Well-read, well-spoken, with a voice that sounded like steady ground. He complimented her insights during discussions, offered to walk her to her car, called her elegant, and Margaret, still fragile in her new skin, felt the stirrings of connection she hadn't expected. But soon, the compliments began to shift. He'd say, "You're surprisingly attractive for your age," or "You ramble a little when you're excited, but it's kind of cute." Harmless, right? Just observations, just being honest. At least that's what Margaret told herself at first, but over time she noticed she was talking less in the group, fixing her hair before every meeting, second-guessing her opinions during conversations, laughing at things that didn't feel funny. She said to me once, "It wasn't what he said. It was how I started to feel afterward, like I needed to shrink just a bit to stay lovable." That's the weight of weaponized honesty. It doesn't wound outright. It grazes, repeatedly, until you become the one doing the cutting, on yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know the truth about you." But what if the one man closest to you is slowly rewriting that truth in your mind? What if just being honest is actually just being unkind with good grammar? When someone repeatedly says things that make you second-guess yourself, your appearance, your voice, your worth, and then hides behind the veil of honesty, that's not communication. That's control with a polished edge. And often it's harder to spot in later life, because we're told, take the compliment. Don't be so sensitive. At least he's being real. But truth without kindness is not a virtue. It's a weapon. You know it's happening when you start editing yourself around them, when you catch your reflection and flinch, when the things you once loved about yourself feel too much or not enough. And here's what's most dangerous. You might not even recognize it as disrespect, because he's not raising his voice. He's not calling you names. He's just making sure you stay in a box with nice words printed on the outside. Margaret told me the moment she realized the truth. It was during a conversation about aging. She said she was thinking of going gray naturally. He leaned in and said, "Don't do that. I love that you still care about how you look." She smiled politely, but something in her stomach turned. And for the first time, instead of wondering what was wrong with her, she wondered what was wrong with the way he made her feel. That's when things began to change, because love, when it's real, doesn't make you question your worth. It reflects it. It doesn't silence your opinions. It draws them out. It doesn't point out your flaws dressed in compliments. It learns how to see the beauty in your truth without touching the bruises. As Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you said, forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So if his honesty makes you feel smaller, less certain, less you, that's not truth. That's erosion. And no woman, at any age, should have to trade her dignity for approval. Words that bruise while smiling are still bruises. Now, in our final reflection, let's talk about one of the quietest betrayals of all, when love chooses to show up, only when you're strong, and vanishes when your body begins to ask for gentleness. Stay close. This next one matters more than we thought. 5. Never accept neglect for your health and well-being. The wound is the place where the light enters you. Rumi, but what happens when the person who claims to love you flinches at your wounds, not the kind that bleed, but the kind that ache quietly, in the joints, in the blood sugar dips, in the moments you forget things or need to sit down a little longer than expected? True love doesn't just walk beside you when you're glowing, it kneels beside you when you're tired and listens when your body whispers, "I can't today." Teresa was 72 when she met him. She had raised 3 children, survived breast cancer, and lived with chronic diabetes and back pain for over a decade. But she still made it to yoga twice a week, still laughed loud at dinner, still walked to the community center every Thursday for craft nights and conversation. That's where she met Paul. He was recently retired, tall, outdoorsy, full of plans and energy. He noticed her watercolor paintings, said they felt peaceful. At first, he was kind. He called when she had doctor's appointments, made her soup when her blood sugar dropped, said he liked that she took care of herself. But as their time together deepened, his patience began to shrink. One Sunday morning, she texted to say she needed to cancel a picnic. Her back had flared up badly. He replied, "Don't let your health define you, Teresa." Just 7 words, but they stung. Not because they were cruel, but because they were so easy for him to say when it wasn't his pain. After that, things shifted. He stopped asking if she needed to rest, started suggesting hikes instead of quiet walks, got frustrated when she needed to stop midway, and when she mentioned it hurt, he'd just smile and say, "You're tougher than that." So Teresa did what so many women do. She pushed through, ignored the stiffness, laughed through the dizziness, tried to be easy, low maintenance, tried to be the version of herself he had fallen for, until one Tuesday afternoon, walking with him through a local park, she felt a sharp twist in her lower back. But she didn't speak up. She told herself she'd be fine. 2 minutes later, she collapsed. No broken bones, just bruised pride. And something deeper. The realization that she hadn't just fallen that day. She had been falling for weeks, falling out of her body to stay inside his comfort zone. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. But love that only honors your joy, your ease, your sunshine, while flinching at your fatigue, isn't love, it's preference. And aging in all its softness and strength is not a flaw. It's not a burden. It's the truth of your body, and it deserves to be met with grace. You shouldn't have to pretend to be healthier than you are. You shouldn't feel guilty for needing a slower pace. You shouldn't hide your prescriptions or downplay your pain to earn someone's warmth. Teresa told me later, I kept trying to match his pace until I realized I had stopped honoring my own. That's the line. When love begins to feel like a performance, not of beauty, but of wellness, it's time to pause. The right man won't roll his eyes at your medication list. He won't sigh when you say you're tired. He won't joke about how you used to be more energetic. He will sit beside you, bring a blanket, and say, "Let's rest today. We've got time." Because your body has carried you through so much. It deserves kindness, not pressure. If he only walks beside you when you're strong, he doesn't deserve your softness. And now, as we reach the end of this reflection, there's one final truth to return to. You've given, you've waited, you've endured. But this chapter, this age, this season, is not about survival. It's about sovereignty, and the love you accept now should reflect that. Let's talk about it. One last time. You don't need anyone to make you feel enough, because you already are. If you've walked through divorce, through widowhood, through years of quiet giving, then this season is not about pleasing. It's about choosing. Choosing peace, choosing clarity, choosing yourself. You're not too old to walk away. You're not too late to begin again, and you are certainly not alone. Because love at this age should feel like ease, Not effort, not shrinking, not sacrifice, but steady, gentle, rooted in truth. And if even one of these stories stirred something inside you, drop a simple in the comments. Not for me, but for every woman reading who needs to know she's not the only one. And if this space feels safe, feel free to subscribe. Not because I'll change your life, but because I see the one you're already building, and I'd be honored to walk beside you while you do. Until next time, protect your peace. You've earned it, all of it.